It's my channel, and I talk about bugs and books and lots of other stuff. It's my channel, Opalescence.
Hey everybody, today I'm going to be talking about all of the books I read in 2024. So I read a total of 57 books. Technically 58, I forgot to count one. It's whatever. But yeah, I read, which is more than a book a week, which is really impressive considering that's, I think, the most amount of books I've ever read in 1 year in my entire life. So I'm really proud of myself for that. I don't think I'm ever going to achieve that again, but we'll see. According to Goodreads, it came out to a total of 19... I have it written on my notes here. 19,315 pages, which is a lot. The shortest book I read was Antigone. This isn't the whole book. Antigone isn't the whole book. It is 1/3 of this book. And I don't even know if it should count as a book because technically it's a play, but Romeo and Juliet also counts as a book. So... And then the longest book I read was The Count of Monte Cristo, which, yeah, it was long. And I don't even know if it was necessarily worth my time. I enjoyed reading, well, you'll get into my opinion later. The most popular book I read this year was The Great Gatsby. And I read this book not once this year, but twice actually. And then So Goodreads just put this as the least shelved book I read, so I guess it was the least read by other people on Goodreads, which was One of Us. I have mixed feelings about this book as well. Anyways, it said that I gave the average book I read a 3.7 on the star scale. It's out of 5 stars, so a 3.7 isn't bad. That's like a B+. Or, that's like a B. Yeah, it's like a B. No, that's like a C+, so I'll let it pass. And now I'm going to talk about all of the books that I read, in somewhat chronological order. I'm also not going to talk about all of them, because I don't feel like editing an hour-long video. However, I will talk about a good bit of them, and I'll cover the important ones, the ones that actually matter, I think, in the grand scheme of things. Alright. The first book I read this year was The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. Now, as you saw in my Grammy video, I love to talk about celebrities. So, obviously, I also love to read about celebrities. And this did not disappoint. It did tell a lot about Britney Spears' life. And it covered a lot of dark topics about her life as well, and honestly just made me feel really bad for her. It was still a very good book though. I finished it in one day. So that just shows how good it is. The next book I read was The Fear by Natasha Preston. I got this book as a Christmas present. And oh boy, was it a good present, because I really enjoyed reading this. This book was very interesting, considering it had both a random teenage girl whose friends start getting murdered, and the murderer's perspective. How many murder mystery novels do you read where the murderer writes half the book as well? I did figure out who it was by like page 50, but besides that, it was still a pretty good book in my opinion, and it was a different perspective, which I like, because I don't just like reading the same copy paste book over and over and over again, which sometimes it does feel like that with some really dumb mystery books. I also read a book like this later this year, which I'm not going to talk about in this video. However, it also had like a segment from like the murderer of the book, and honestly it was just really boring, so I'm happy that this author did it well. This is the next book I'm going to talk about. This is the same author. As you can tell, they have very similar cover art. This book sucked, to put it bluntly, I guess. I just did not enjoy this one. Like, The Fear was amazing. I don't know what's going on in the island. The next book I'm going to talk about, I don't have a copy of, because something I do, and that I think everybody else should do too, is utilize their local library. My library has not only an online app where I can get audiobooks for free from my house. I could be laying in bed and I can just go on the app and get a new audiobook. It's really that simple. Sometimes you have to wait in line if it's a popular book, but that's how I read so many books this year, is that yes, I did listen to audiobooks don't come for me. Most of the books I show in this video, like if I show a book that I have like this, that means I read it like this. So most of these other ones that I don't have a paper copy of, I'd most likely read an audiobook. However, I don't think we should be necessarily dissing audiobooks. I know a lot of people like to do that, but no. Audiobooks are very helpful. They're very nice, and they don't use paper, which is great for the environment. Come on, guys, we love the environment, right? Anyways. And then I also just borrowed a lot of books from my library. Some of these books I bought from my library's thrift store. Like this copy of The Great Gatsby, bought it from my library's thrift store. I got this book for like $1 at my library's thrift store. You should really check if your local library has a thrift store because it's amazing. But yeah, I did borrow a lot of the books because I'm not going to spend a fortune trying to read. So anyways, that segments me into the next book, which is One of Us is Lying. I read this in audiobook format, and it was pretty good. I also read the 2 accompanying books. They were not very good. However, One of Us Was Lying was a very good book. I did predict it, though. So, okay, my logic for counting what counts a book as good is, or like not necessarily a book, but like a murder mystery or a thriller novel, is if I can predict what's going to happen, is basically how soon can I predict what's going to happen. One of Us Is Lying, it was like the first, I was like, wait, it couldn't be. I was like doing some math, and I was like, wait, it can't be any of them. Like, none of them did it, clearly. And I was like, well, then who did it? It's not the teacher. Oh my gosh, it was the Simon dude. So, yeah, that was an odd book. But I appreciate it for trying to do something different, and I did enjoy it at the time. Then I read all the sequels. And personally, I didn't like the sequels. That's just me. I didn't like the sequels. I didn't think they were good. You can have your own opinion. The next book I read, which is one of my favorite I read this year, was Wrong Place, Wrong Time. I was reading a lot of these thriller books in a row. I really don't know why in January to February of last year I just decided to go on a rampage and read 3 thriller novels a week. But I did it. Anyways, Wrong Place, Wrong Time was a really good book, and I really enjoyed it. I'll probably put a picture of it up on the screen, maybe, if I'm not if my alter ego editor Opalescence decides to do it. Anyways, Wrong Place, Wrong Time was a very good book, and it was basically this lady watches her son murder someone in their driveway. And she gets so upset that she sends herself back into the past to figure out why it happened, and it was really good. I really enjoyed it. The next book I'm going to talk about is called Ketchup Clouds. I do not have a physical copy of it. I do not know where it went. I also got this book from my library's thrift store, which, with a library thrift store, you have no idea what you're getting. Sometimes you're going to get the most amazing book you've ever read in your entire life, and then other times you're going to get some weird book that makes a Hitler joke every once every 3 chapters. Ketchup Clouds was interesting. I don't know how I feel about it, because why? Okay, so basically the premise of Ketchup Clouds is this girl is sending letters to a death row inmate. Why? Because curiosity, I guess. But then at the end of the book, it turns out that she murdered her friend, and she just wants to know. She just wants condolence from a fellow murderer. Odd premise, I do say. However, it wasn't bad. It got 3 stars from me because I was just confused by the end of the book. By the end of the book, I was just like, what on earth is going on here? I was just like, now I'm going to talk about I Must Betray You. This was also a really amazing book, and I really enjoyed reading it. Now, before this, could I tell you anything about Romanian history? I could maybe tell you that they were under the Iron Curtain at some point, and I could definitely point it out on a map. But other than that, I knew nothing about Romania. Now I know a good bit about Romania. Anyways, it was a really good book, and I really enjoyed reading it. That was a 5-star book, and you should read it too. The next book I'm going to talk about is Romeo and Juliet. Why? I want to know why Romeo and Juliet has been marketed as like the ultimate love story. Like, who thought this was a good idea? Okay, like 16-year-old and like 13 or 12-year-old, if I'm remembering right, fall in love rapidly, like really quick, because their families are rivaling neighbors. So these two little teenagers have their little romance, secretly get married, and then both die. Why? Oh, why? Why is this considered why is this considered the greatest love story of all time? Like, I love you, man, but, I ain't ditching my whole family for you, and I'm not ditching my, like, entire family and, like, all the money they have, okay? Like, sorry, bestie. Sorry. So, I thought that was odd. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Chalice of the Gods, which was the next Percy Jackson book. Now let me tell you, I was so into Percy Jackson before it was like a popular TikTok thing. Now listen. I have kept up to date with the entire Percy Jackson series. Like, I've read the first books when I was a little kid, right? And I just kept reading them as they came out. Now that I'm older, I have still kept up with it. And The Chalice of the Gods was definitely Percy Jackson. So it was a good book. It was 5 stars. And we're going to get more eventually. So if I make another one of these in 2020, that's like all the books I've read in 2025, you'll probably see the next Percy Jackson book in that one as well. Anyways, the next book I'm going to talk about is They'll Never Catch Us. Cross country! Now, a fun fact about me that you may not know is that I once fractured my elbow, not doing cross country, but doing track and field. Yeah, in case you guys didn't know, I used to be a spectacular hurdler until I tripped and fell and busted my elbow and then never did another sport again. Anyways, but They'll Never Catch Us was a really good book. I thought it was interesting. I liked how it actually was like, it used real terms from cross country, because I did do cross country for a while. So I thought it was a really good book. And I gave it 4 stars because it wasn't good enough to get all 5. All right. Next, I'm going to talk about Fahrenheit 451. Now, let me tell you about dystopian. Being forced to read this in an English class, was it my favorite? No. Would I have probably liked the book a little bit more if I got to read it on my own time? Yes. The book definitely had a lot of ups and downs and stuff. However, in the end, I think it turned out to be very interesting. And also, I love the title. I love when books have a title that's like a really interesting fact. It's like kind of like a fun fact about the plot or something. Or it's just like something that is slightly relevant. However, I think that showing the main character and like showing how he is in a very important part of this society, and how he's like a firefighter, even though he doesn't put out fires, he starts them. I thought that was a really interesting way to like show people. I think this book had good world building. Like, by the end of the book, I very much understood kind of what their world was about. And also the movie adaptation was bad. Fight me. Next, I'm going to talk about the Count of Monte Cristo. Oh boy, revenge. Now, this book was interesting. You see, this year I was on a rampage to read lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of classical books, simply because I want to be more educated. And because I'm a nerd who wants to be at a tasteful dinner one day, and they're going to have some dish at this fancy restaurant, and it's gonna be like named after one of the characters from this book, and then I can sit there and I can be like, yes guys, actually I can tell you all about this because I read the book. I love being a nerd. So the plot of this book is basically this guy, his girlfriend decides that she would rather be with her own cousin than him. And also her cousin like fakes his death or something and gets him like sent away. And he's in jail for forever. And then he escapes jail with the help of some old man. And then he goes and finds treasure. And then he comes back and gets revenge. The next book I'm going to talk about is Powerless. Talk about Powerless. Oh my goodness gracious. This book was madly overhyped. Is it good? Yes. Is it a life-changing work of fiction? No. Please. Please stop treating it as such. Especially Book Talk. And like, Book Talk was ridiculous about this book. Like, it is on every Book Talk list. It is in like every third like fantasy Book Talk video, and I just can't stand it. This book is so oversaturated and everywhere. It's an okay book. Yeah, it's a good book. It's a good book. However, it's not great. And also, I'm pretty sure the writer was accused of using AI to write it as well, which isn't great. Oh, and then I read the sequel. The sequel was the most irritating piece of fiction I've ever read in my entire life. I didn't even finish the sequel because I hated it. I hated the sequel. I got like halfway done with it and I gave up because I was so irritated. Like, I would be listening to it, right? And like every 15 minutes, one character would say something so ridiculous, I'd just have to pause it and be like, shut up. Especially like the brother that's like the king now in the book, in like the sequel book, is so annoying. Please get therapy, I beg you. Please. Because half of his writing was just him being like, I stared out the window. Sadly. Because I have no hopes and dreams. Like, bro, you sound like Squidward! You sound like Squidward! And I'm so mad about this book. You can tell I'm really pissed about how much time I wasted on it. Like, I wish I had a time machine to tell me to never start the series. Also, the person who originally told me to go read Powerless isn't even my friend anymore. Like, I have no good correlations with the series. Like, every time I hear about the series, it's drama. Every time I see anything about the series, it's horrible. Like, please, make it stop. So, was the first book good? Yeah. Was everything that came after it? No. Next, I'm going to talk about The 13th Tale. You want to know who recommended me this book? My mom. Do you want to know who had to explain the ending to me to this book? My mom. It was a pretty good book. I think I would have liked it better if I actually understood the ending and I didn't have to have my own mother explain it to me. Because we both had two different interpretations of the ending. Well, not really two interpretations, because one of them is the definite ending, and one of them isn't. And what I thought was the definite ending was not the definite ending. What I'm going to talk about reading is An Ember in the Ashes. Now, An Ember in the Ashes is everything in its sequel, like A Torch Against the Night or something. It's everything that I wish Powerless and its sequel, Reckless, would have been. And I am so glad that I actually ended up reading An Ember in the Ashes, and that I didn't just drop fantasy as a genre after trying to read Reckless. Now, I feel that An Ember in the Ashes was a really good book, and also the sequel. Was the sequel a bit slow? Yes. However, I still really enjoyed it, and I thought it was a really good book. And this is a case of Book Talk actually giving me a good recommendation. Now, do I read Book Talk books? Yes. Do I read all Book Talk books? No. Because Book Talk gives me the most, like, uneven recommendations. Like, it'll be like the worst book I've ever read or the best book I've ever read. Like, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder is like the best book I've ever read. If He Had Been With Me is like the worst book I've ever read. and there's no in between. I never read a book talk book and I'm like, meh. It's always like, it's good, it's great, or it's bad, it's downright horrible. In fact, there's one book that I kind of thought about talking about that was a book talk book, but there's one book talk book that I considered talking about in this video. However, it was so bad that I decided I'm not even going to give it publicity. Because that book glorified so many bad things, and it was just a horrible read. And I'm so glad that it has kind of been dropped as a book talk book. I haven't seen much about it recently, but still, horrible book. The next book I'm going to talk about is Vera Wang's Unsolicited Guide for Murderers. This was a pretty good book. Old grandma has murder happen in her store and decides to figure out who it is. It's a pretty good plot that eventually all fills together to decipher family trauma and generational trauma. And I just thought it was a really good book. Like, W book, fire book. And do I have any experience with any of the topics mentioned in the book? No. I have nowhere in that realm, but I thought it was a pretty good book. And that's just my opinion. Then I read The Great Gatsby for the first time. I read it twice this year. 2 times. It was better the second. The first time, I was like, why do people like this book so much? It's kind of mid. And I don't think I fully understood it the first time. However, I read it a second time, 3 or 4 months later. And the second time, I loved it. This is an amazing book. I really like it. The first time I didn't. The second time I did. Because the second time, I think I focused less on the plot and more on the characters. Because The Great Gatsby is a character-driven book. It's not a plot-driven book. At least in my opinion. In my opinion, I think it's the characters that tell the story rather than plot and plot events. Right? Because really, like, who do we remember from the book? Do we think about the major plot points? Like the car accident? When I think of this book, I think of Jay Gatsby and his mansion and luxury, okay? When I think of this book, I think of the main character, Nick. Was it Nick Carraway? I can't remember the main character's name for some reason. I think of Nick Carraway being a little journalist nerd. I think of Jordan being a pretentious hipster golfer. And I think of Tom being a manly man who's really insecure. And that's what I think of when I think of this book. I don't think of the major plot points. I think of the characters. Which is why I think this book will always be more enjoyable on another read. In fact, in World War II, this was the book that they sent their soldiers with to war. This is the book that they read in the trenches. And I understand why, because this is a good book that you can just reread over and over and over again, because you can get more out of it each time. Because each time you can find deeper understanding of each character. Which is why I almost made a full video on The Great Gatsby, but I eventually decided not to. It comes with the long list of other videos that I scrapped. Because believe it or not, for as sparsely as I post, I scrap a lot of videos. Like a lot of videos. Like, there have been some videos. Now, this is side story, I guess. Whenever I'm making a YouTube video, typically my process is I write down the idea, right? Because I feel like every single motivational thing ever has told you to write stuff down. And then once I write it down, I think about it, I sit on it for about a week to think if it would actually be a good idea to make into a video. And then after that period, I then start to do research, especially if it's a topic that I need to do research on, because I do a fair amount of videos. And then sometimes I film a video, but I just never edit it. And then sometimes I film and edit a video, just never post it. So scrapped videos make up a very large percentage of what I actually spend my time making. If I posted every single video I scrapped, I would probably be posting at least once a week. And I have video ideas all the time. Like, I will be sitting watching a movie or something, and I'll be like, ooh, I could make a video about this. Or I'll be watching a Gilmore Girls episode, and I'm like, ooh, I should talk about fast fashion. Stay tuned for that in February. And yeah, that's just kind of my process. So I really wanted to make a book, or not a book. I really want to make a video about The Great Gatsby, and I might read it a third. I might read it a third or even fourth or fifth time, and then I might make a video about it. Because as you can see, I had a lot of thoughts. Anyways, on to the next book. The next book was The Awakening by Kate Chopin, I believe. It was mid. It was mid. I do think this was a good testimony and like a good like what happens to the women in like the late 1700s, early 1800s who didn't want to be wives, who didn't want to be mothers and housemakers, and that didn't want to be wives or mothers, but also didn't want to be a nun. I think this is a good story about that type of woman. And also, fun fact I learned about this author is that this author was the creator of another story called like Desiree's Baby. I had to read his Desiree's Baby once for a school thing. It was like a class assignment. Everyone had to read it, and everybody was so confused by Desiree's Baby. And I didn't even know that was written by the same author until I read this. So, yeah. I think Kate Chopin is a good example of an American fiction writer, though. Or just, yeah, a female American author. And I respect this book for that. I didn't think it was a great book, but I thought it was meh. I thought it was okay. Now I'm going to talk about a book I absolutely loathe. If He Had Been With Me. If only he had been with you in the first 50% of the book, maybe I wouldn't have wanted to die by the end. Now listen. If He Had Been With Me has some of the biggest pacing issues of any book I've ever read in my entire life. Why was there like no major plot points for 90% of the book? Like, I'm listening to it as an audiobook, right? The audiobook, because I use the Libby app, right, to read my books, and it shows me, right, how far I've progressed through the audiobook. I am 90% done with this book. When something finally happens, when there's actually a plot point, where it's not just about the stupid Autumn girl and how she wears tiaras and she's not like the other girls, and how she has her annoying boyfriend. Like, I verbally said shut up multiple times throughout this book. Not because I was like, oh my gosh. Wait, hold on, we gotta do a reenactment. Oh my gosh, shut up. It wasn't like that. No, it was like a shut up. It was like a be quiet. You are so loud and annoying. I want you to stop. And If He Had Been With Me, it was just boring. Like I didn't understand people on BookTok who were like, this book had me sobbing. I was like, no, nothing happened for 90% of the book. Like, and yes, is the ending sad? Yes. Yes, it's a sad ending. Was it worth the 90% of the book I had to read to get to that ending? No. No, it was not. I would love if someone who actually liked that book, I would love for them to come explain to me why they actually like it, despite the horrible pacing issues. Like, please explain to me why this is a good book, because I don't understand. I also read Macbeth twice this year. However, I thought that it was better the first time. The second time, I kind of already knew it was going to happen, so it was more lame and boring. However, it was a very good book the first time around. And quintessential Shakespeare. And this is also a book I read to be a nerd. Sue me. Yeah, this is also kind of a book I read on my own just to be a nerd. So, yeah. Now, I'm sure all faithful viewers of this channel already know my love for this book, but this is my favorite book I read this year. I love birdology. I love birdology so much, in fact, that I made a whole video just talking about it. And birds. I became a pescatarian because of this book. I stopped, because there was one segment of that video where I go into my, where I go and I get a bag of frozen chicken out of my freezer and I say, I'm so sorry, birds. And it shifted something. It shifted something in my soul. And I was just like, I felt really guilty eating meat. And so I stopped eating meat. Yes, I still eat shrimp and fish. I'm a pescatarian. This is why. Does this book actually, is this book like hating on meat eaters? No, this book doesn't really say anything about people who eat meat. It says nothing at all. However, sentient birds make me feel. Now, I'm going to talk about another classic book that I read, because classics. Wuthering Heights. Now, this book, I actually got the fancy copy of. Look how shiny and golden this cover is. Oh yeah, I got the fancy copy. Oh yeah, guys, none of you can borrow my very elusive copy of Wuthering Heights with a little tiny bookmark. Was Wuthering Heights actually good? It was okay. It was decent. I got into an argument with my mom if one of the characters was black. So that was a highlight. And then I just thought it was an okay book. It was a little sad. It was a little sad, but I very much like the descriptions. Like low-key I want to live in Wuthering Heights, like just a little bit. But I wouldn't want to deal with how much it rains. Next, I'm going to talk about The Hound of the Baskervilles. This is the first Sherlock Holmes novel I've ever read, and I did a little bit of research about Sherlock Holmes before I read it. And did you know the guy who wrote Sherlock Holmes is basically just his self-insert fan fiction? Like, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Shakespeare is like basically his self-insert. Because I guess Sherlock Holmes was based off of himself, which I thought was very interesting. He also apparently killed off Sherlock Holmes, but then brought him back. And I believe, I'm not sure which book he killed him off in and brought him back. I feel like this is like a time jump. This book was written after he killed off Sherlock Holmes, and then he was like, this one was made in the past, guys. And it's Sherlock Holmes. But yeah. It was definitely an interesting book. I didn't solve it. So that's a plus. And overall pretty good. Frankenstein. This is not the copy I use. This copy has Frankenstein, Dracula, Dr. Jekyll, and Mr. Hyde in it. All in one book. But no, I just read Frankenstein, and I thought it was really good. Honestly, I feel like the message of that was creators are indebted to their creations, which is always a message that whenever that's a message in media, I always feel like it always results in a good piece of literature. Like, what literature has the message creators are indebted to their creations and isn't good? Go ahead, find me an example. Every single story that I've read where it's like someone creates a creation, it goes mad, or it goes crazy, or better yet, it just wants average love and affection like a normal sentient creature. Frankenstein drives me crazy because I thought it was actually going to be like, ooh, scary monster Frankenstein, ah! But it was actually just like, you put me into this world as a fully sentient adult, and I have no idea how to do anything, and everybody beats me when they see me in public and hurts me, and I hate my life. And that's what the book actually was. Which, oh boy. And I like the title. I like the alternative title of the book was Once the Modern Prometheus. It wasn't the modern. Yeah, the title of the book was like The Modern Prometheus or something. I think I'm thinking of like the Oppenheimer dudes thing. But no, I think Frankenstein had an alternate title, The Modern Prometheus, which I really like. I mentioned earlier in this video that I like Percy Jackson, so it may not come as a surprise that I like the Greek myth illusion. And that is all of the books that I'm going to talk about today. thank you so much for watching my video to the end. And honestly, if you watch this all the way to the end, like, come see me for a gold star or something, because, like, you have a better attention span than 95% of the people. I also might just, like, slice up this video and make little shorts out of it, because you know how them 3-second attention spans be attention spanning. Better yet, I'm gonna get, like, clips of me playing, like, freaking Subway Surfers and just put that on the side. That's how I'm gonna get views, y'all. Don't worry. Don't worry. Anyways, bye!